Sausage Lion by Michael Moore-Pergo. Chapter 1. It was Christmas Eve when Tom first saw the lion. His mother had sent him out to fetch the logs, and there was a lion padding through the orchard with a string of sausages hanging from its mouth. Tom ran back inside the house to tell them, but his father just laughed and his mother said he must have been imagining things. He told them, and he told them, but they wouldn't even come out to look. But it's true, Tom shouted. It was a real lion. I know it was. Perhaps it just looked like a lion, said his mother. After all, it is getting dark outside, isn't it, dear? It couldn't have been anything else, Tom said. There's nothing else looks like a lion. But they wouldn't listen. That's enough, Tom, said his father, who was already cross. It's Christmas Eve, not April Fool's Day. You don't really expect us to believe a story like that, do you? We're not that stupid, you know. I don't want to hear another word about it. Hear me? Else I'll send you to your room, Christmas Eve or no Christmas Eve. But it was a lion, a real lion, said Tom. Honest? Right, that's it, his father said, banging the table and pointing to the door. Upstairs. And so Tom was sent to bed early on Christmas Eve. And when he dreamt that night, it was not of angels or of Father Christmas, but of lions. All Christmas Day, nothing more was said about the lion until Uncle Bertie and Auntie Rose came for tea, as they always did. Even then, Tom didn't really mean to tell them about the lion because he knew they wouldn't believe him either. Somehow it just slipped out. And what's the little lad going to be when he grows up? Uncle Bertie asked, putting his teacup down. Is he going to be a farmer like his dad? My, hasn't he grown again, said Auntie Rose. 9 years old and nearly as tall as his mum. Spitting an image of his father, though. Same ginger hair and rosy cheeks. Break the girls' hearts he will, just like his dad. And she stuffed another mince pie into her mouth. That's her 5th mince pie, Tom thought. She'll burst if she eats any more. They always ask me so many questions and they always talk about me as if I'm not there. And I have to kiss Auntie Rose when they come and when they go. I wouldn't mind. But she squeezes me so tight and she always leaves lipstick on my face. Train driver last year, wasn't it? Uncle Bertie said. Didn't you want to be a train driver? Lorry driver, said Tom. But I've changed my mind. I want to be a lion tamer now. It was the first thing that came into his head. Oh, what? Auntie Rose laughed and she patted her chest to stop herself choking on the mince pie she'd just swallowed. What do you want to do that for? Because I like lions, Tom said. You ever seen one? Uncle Bertie asked. Yesterday, said Tom. Saw one yesterday. And Tom felt his mother and father glaring at him. Went to the zoo, did you, dear? Auntie Rose said and sipped her tea, her little finger cocked in the air. Tom shook his head. Circus, was it then? No, said Tom. Television. You saw it on the telly then, Auntie Rose went on. Tom shook his head again. I saw a real one, he said. That's enough, Tom, said his father gruffly. No more of your stories now. Auntie Rose isn't interested. Wasn't a story, Dad, Tom said. It's the honest truth, like I told you. We said we weren't going to talk about it anymore, didn't we, dear? Said his mother, putting a hand on his arm. But I saw it, said Tom. I know I did. I'm not making it up. It was a lion. I know it was. You just won't believe me. That's all. Tears of anger came into his eyes. I believe you saw something, Tom dear, said his mother. But it couldn't have been a lion, could it? Because they're all in zoos or circuses. You don't find them just wandering around the place. Auntie Rose looked around her like a flustered hen. What are you all talking about? She asked. What they're talking about, Rose, said Tom's father, is a lot of old nonsense, that's what it is. Tom comes running in here yesterday evening, screaming his head off. I've seen a lion, he says, walking through the orchard just behind Mrs. Blunden's cottage. A lion with a string of sausages hanging out of his mouth, if you please. Believe that, you believe anything. And he turned angrily to Tom. Now, I don't want to hear any more about it, Tom. The phone rang in the kitchen, and Tom's mother left the room to answer it. Tom tried to blink back his tears and almost succeeded, except for one large tear that trickled down his cheek and dropped onto his plate. Now look what you've done, said Auntie Rose. You've gone and upset him. She pulled her handkerchief out of her sleeve and wiped Tom's face. We can't have tears on Christmas Day, can we now? We all make mistakes from time to time. It's nothing to cry about. She planted a noisy kiss on his ear just as his mother came back into the room. Who was it? His father asked. It's all very strange, she said. That was Mrs. Blunden on the phone. Tom looked up. What did she want? Tom's father asked. The pigs haven't got into her garden again, have they? No. She said she just wanted to know if the butcher had delivered some of her meat to us by mistake yesterday. If she's out, he usually leaves her meat in the box by her gate. Well, some of it was there when she came back yesterday evening, but not all of it, and she wondered if we had it. It was sausages, wasn't it? Tom said. Yes, she said, 3 pounds of pork sausages, and they've gone. See, I told you, didn't I? Said Tom. I wasn't making it up, was I? For a moment there was a silence around the table, and then his father spoke up. Just because Mrs. Blunden's sausages have gone missing, that doesn't mean a lion took them, does it? Could have been anything, couldn't it? Fox, cat, badger, dog. Could have been that sheepdog of yours, that Sam. He's always up to some mischief or other. Needs a good hiding, that one. Not trained like he should be. It wasn't Sam, Dad, said Tom. He was too big to be Sam. Long as this table he was, Dad, honest. Face like a cat with whiskers and pricked up pointed ears. Great long tail he had. I saw him, Dad, close as I am to you. The sausages were dragging along the ground, so he was treading on them. Sort of gingery light brown he was. Sam's a sandy sort of colour, isn't he, dear? Tom's mother said. It could have been him, couldn't it? Perhaps it was Who is? His father asked. Your lion, I suppose, said Uncle Bertie. And he began to shake with laughter. Yes, said Tom, as calmly as he could. It's my lion, and he's outside now eating the turkey you put out in the dustbin, Mum. The faces around him had all turned serious. Come and look, he said. Quick, he's outside the back door. If you're joking, said his father. I'm not, Tom said. Honest, I'm not. Come quick, else he'll be gone. And you mustn't make a noise, else you'll frighten him away. In their paper hats, they stole through the kitchen towards the back door. His father took down the gun from the shelf, slipped in 2 cartridges, and snapped it shut. He opened the door, but only just wide enough so that he could put his head round. See, Dad? I told you, didn't I? It's a lion, isn't it? He won't hurt you, said Tom. He's just hungry, that's all. Some lion, his father said, and threw open the door. Why don't you have another look, Tom? Tom's heart sank. He looked outside the door. All he could see of Sam at first was his wagging tail. The rest of him was inside the dustbin. When he did turn round, there was a sausage in his mouth. So that's your lion, is it? Said Uncle Bertie, and he began to laugh again. So that's Tom's sausage lion. Chapter 2. Only one thing mattered to Tom now. He had to prove to his mother and father that he had not been making it all up. And there was only one way to do that. He had to find the lion and bring him home. He had no idea how he was going to do it, but he had to try. So every day for the rest of the holidays, Tom searched the farm and the high moor beyond for some trace of the lion. He took Sam with him, hoping he would be able to pick up the scent and follow it. Sam found plenty of rabbits and hares and pheasants, and he chased them all over the moor, but he could find no lion. There were no footprints to follow either, because the ground was bone hard with frost. Even the puddles were frozen over. His mother and father were too busy lambing the sheep to bother where he was. So long as he came back on time for meals, they asked no questions. By the time he went back to school, they had quite forgotten about Tom's sausage lion. Tom knew it was no good trying to make them believe him anymore. They would never believe him now, not until they saw the lion for themselves. Tom was very happy to go back to school that term. Upcott Farm, where he lived, was over 3 miles from town, so that he hardly ever saw his school friends in the holidays. At home, there was only Sam to talk to about his lion, and Tom was never really sure whether Sam believed him or not. When he got on the school bus that first morning, he was longing to tell someone about his lion. He hardly waited till he sat down before he told them the whole story. "Twice I seen him," he said, "once with Mrs. Blunden's sausages and once with the turkey. Massive he was, got green eyes, at least I think they were green, and you should have seen his teeth, long as my fingers they were. He'd crunch those turkey bones just like they were wafers." When he had finished, he looked around at his friends. They were all open-mouthed. None of them said anything until Barry Parsons spoke up. Barry Parsons had never liked Tom, and Tom had never much liked him. Tom had taken his place as right back in the school football team, and Barry had never forgiven him. "Pull the other one, Tom," said Barry. "Ain't no lions round here." "Well, I seen him," Tom said, looking around at the others. He could see that they didn't believe him either. "It's true, I did." "Who else saw it then?" Barry asked. "Just me," Tom said quietly. "Wasn't anyone else there, but I saw him right close up, honest." "Then why didn't he eat you if you were that close?" Barry went on. "Suppose you shook his paw and wished him Happy Christmas?" And then the others began to laugh. Barry left his seat and went down on all fours in the gangway and crawled up and down the bus, roaring like a lion, clawing at everyone and shouting out, "Got any sausages? I'm Tom's lion. Got any turkey? I'm Tom's lion." And the whole bus howled with laughter. Tom turned his face to the window so they couldn't see how angry he was. He just could not understand why no one would believe him. Even his best friends were laughing at him. Well, he'd show them. He'd show them all. Mr. Morgan was Tom's class teacher. He was funny when he was in a good mood and horrible when he was not. And this morning, Mr. Morgan was not in a good mood. He told them so as soon as he came into the classroom. "Some idiot skidded into my car on the way to school this morning, so I'm not a happy man, understand?" "Yes, sir," they chorused. "It's your job to make me happy, isn't it?" "Yes, sir. So I want each of you to tell me the best thing, the funniest thing, or the most exciting thing that's happened to you during the holidays." He came to Tom's desk and looked down at him. "And what's the matter with you, Tom Goss? You looked down in the mouth this morning. I recognise a fellow sufferer." "You're usually a cheerful sort of Charlie, Tom. First day of term, is that what it is?" "Yes, sir," said Tom. "Same for all of us," Mr. Morgan sighed and shook his head. "Still, we mustn't feel sorry for ourselves, must we? We'll start with you, Tom. Stand up then, don't be shy." Tom stood up. He couldn't think of anything to say. Everyone was looking at him, waiting. "Come on, Tom," said Mr. Morgan. "What about Christmas Day? Something good must have happened on Christmas Day, surely. Did you get any nice presents?" "He got a lion," said Barry, and the whole class broke into giggles. "Oh dear, oh dear, said Mr. Morgan, advancing towards Barry's desk and silencing the class as he went. Oh dear, Barry the clown is back. But he's come to the wrong place, hasn't he? This isn't a circus, boy. No, it's my class, see? And when I ask for you to speak, you'll speak. Until then, put a sock in it, there's a good boy. Else, I'll get ugly. And you don't want me ugly, do you? No, sir, said Barry. Good. Now, Tom, what's all this about a lion? Tom looked at Mr. Morgan. Like all the children, he had always been a little frightened of him. Everyone knew he had a wicked temper. But he had no choice anyway, not now. He couldn't get out of it. Saw him on Christmas Eve first, Tom said. In the orchard it was. What, a lion? A real live lion? Mr. Morgan said. Tom nodded, and there were one or two sniggers around him, swiftly silenced by a glance from Mr. Morgan. Go on, boy, I'm listening. Well, sir, he was walking through the apple trees with Mrs. Blunden's sausages hanging out of his mouth, and when he saw me, he just ran off, almost tripped over them, he did. Tripped over what? Mr. Morgan asked. The sausages, sir, Tom said. Then I saw him again the next day, just after tea on Christmas Day. He was just outside the back door, sir, helping himself to the turkey bones Mum had put out in the dustbin. And he saw me too. I saw him clear as day. Ah, but I thought you said it was after tea, said Mr. Morgan. So it would be getting dark, wouldn't it? Had the outside light on, sir, Tom said. It was a lion, honest it was, sir, just like I seen in books and on the telly. Mr. Morgan thought for a moment, and then his face broke into a smile. That's what I like, Tom. A boy with a bit of imagination. It's a good story. Only one thing wrong with it. If this lion saw you, why didn't he attack you? I mean, you're a fairly tasty morsel for a hungry lion, I'd have thought. And everyone was laughing openly now. But it's all true, sir, Tom shouted. It's not a story. It's true, every word of it. Mr. Morgan's smile vanished. Take care, boy. I won't be shouted at and I won't be lied to. It's not a lie, sir, Tom said. Then who else saw it? Mr. Morgan said. You must have called someone when you saw it outside the back door. No one else saw it, Barry interrupted. Silence, Mr. Morgan bellowed, and he turned back to Tom. So you found a lion outside your back door and you never called anyone? Yes, sir. I did, sir. I called my mum and dad, and Uncle Bertie and Auntie Rose were there too. They came. So they saw it too then? No, not exactly, Tom said. What do you mean, not exactly? Well, by the time they got there, it had run off, and Sam was there instead. Sam? My dog, sir. But the lion was there, sir. I know he was. Honest, sir. Honest? Honest? You don't know the meaning of the worst, Mr. Morgan thundered. Do you expect me to believe you saw a real live lion running around with a string of sausages and help himself to your Christmas turkey? Now either you're lying to me, Tom, or you had too much cider at Christmas and you were seeing things that weren't there. Boys your age shouldn't be drinking cider. I don't like cider, sir, said Tom defiantly, and I'm not lying. All fear of Mr. Morgan now left him. He felt suddenly quite alone in the world and stronger for it. I saw that lion, he said, looking Mr. Morgan straight in the eye. Mr. Morgan gave him every punishment there was. He was sent to Miss Colvin, the headmistress, where he was questioned for over 20 minutes. She didn't believe him either. She said she was disappointed in him and that liars often ended up in trouble or even in prison when they grew up. In break, he had to write out, "I must not lie," 100 times, and he spent the rest of the morning standing with his face to the corner. By the lunch break, everyone in the school knew the story of Tom's sausage lion, and even some of the little infants came up and growled at him in the cloakroom when he was putting his coat on and scarf. They clawed at his back and then ran off shrieking when he turned round. Claire Newman was standing by the door. She was a butcher's daughter, and she was the cleverest girl in Tom's class. She always had her head in some book or other. She was tiny, tiny enough to be an infant, and she wore great thick glasses that she was always losing or breaking. There always seemed to be a piece of elastoplast holding them together. She had an open book in her hand. "Was it this one?" she asked, walking over to him. "Was it the same as this one?" Tom thought for a moment she was teasing him, but then he remembered that Claire Newman was not like that. He looked down at the book. "The cougar, puma, or mountain lion," he read out loud, and there was a picture of the same kind of lion he had seen in the orchard on Christmas Eve. "That's him. That's just like him," Tom said. "But how do you know?" "'Cause I seen him, just like you did, that's why," said Claire. "I was on the rounds with my dad Christmas Eve it was. Dad was delivering Mrs. Blunden's meat, and I was waiting for him in the van. I looked up, and there he was looking through the window at me. We just looked at each other for a moment, and then he ran off." "Didn't you tell your dad?" Tom asked. "Of course I did, but he didn't believe me. I could hardly believe it myself, not till I heard you telling Mr. Morgan. See, I'd left my glasses at home. I'm always forgetting them, and I'm as blind as a bat without my glasses. Everyone knows that. Can't see a sausage without them." "That's meant to be funny, is it?" Tom said. "No," Claire said, and she laughed. "It wasn't meant to be, but come to think of it, it was quite funny, wasn't it?" Tom smiled for the first time that day. "I'm glad you believe me," he said. "I was beginning to think I was imagining things." "Well, we weren't, were we?" said Claire. Chapter 3. "Perhaps if we told the police," Claire said, "perhaps they'd believe us. We've got to make someone believe us before he gets hungry." "What do you mean?" Tom said. "Well, once he gets hungry and there's no more sausages to steal or dustbins to rob, then he'll have to kill. Got to eat, hasn't he? Listen to this." She opened her book again. "When it hunts," she read out, "it shows a daring skill and cruelty equal to that of a tiger. One is reported to have killed 50 sheep in a single night." "Do they kill people as well?" Tom said. Claire shook her head. "Hardly ever. That's what my book says anyway. Only when they're very hungry." The police station was just 5 minutes down the road from the school. They could be back by the end of playtime. They sneaked out of the school gates while Mr. Morgan's back was turned and ran all the way there. The policeman looked down at the two breathless children and tapped his pencil on the counter. "Lost something, have you?" he asked. "No," said Tom, "we've seen something." The policeman sounded bored. "Oh, yes, and what have you seen then? Flying saucers, is it? Or is it pink elephants, perhaps?" And he snorted with laughter. "A lion," said Tom. "I seen a lion running off with Mrs. Blunden's sausages, and she's seen it too, haven't you?" Claire nodded. "Close as I am to you," she said. "Now, let me get this clear. You've seen a lion, have you, running off with Mrs. Blunden's sausages? Is that it?" "Yes," said Tom and Claire together. "And what colour was this lion?" said the policeman, leaning forward on his elbows and smiling at them. "Purple, was he?" with green spots? It was a puma, said Claire, a mountain lion. It's in my book. They come from America, sort of tawny yellow colour they are. So this lion swam here all the way across from America, has it? The smile left his face. What do you think I am? I wasn't born yesterday, you know. Now you get along out of here and stop wasting my time. Lions indeed. Whatever next? Get off with you before I call the sergeant. They walked back to school in silence and slipped into the playground without being noticed. Playtime was still on. I've been thinking, said Claire, sitting down by the railings. You could search that moor forever and never find him, couldn't you? Suppose so, Tom said. So we've got to tempt him back, haven't we? How? Tom asked. Food, Claire said, taking off her glasses and cleaning them with her skirt. That's what he came for in the first place, wasn't it? He wouldn't have risked coming near your house if he wasn't hungry. So why don't we put out some meat for him to tempt him back? You could keep a lookout and photograph him when he comes. If they saw a photo, they'd have to believe us then, wouldn't they? Got a camera, have you? Tom shook his head. No, he said. Well, I have, she said, and it's got a flash on it too. You can borrow it. And where do we get the food from? Tom asked. My dad's a butcher, remember? Claire said, and breathed on her glasses. I'll bring some into school tomorrow. All right? Got a new girlfriend, have we, Tarzan? It was Barry. You, Tarzan, she, Jane, is that it? Tom was surrounded by grinning faces. Barry began to growl at him like a lion, and then everyone copied him. Something snapped suddenly inside Tom. He had had enough. He threw himself at Barry, kicking and punching until they ended up rolling on the ground together. Mr. Morgan broke through the crowd of chanting children and pulled them apart before any real damage was done. But Tom was glad to see that he had given Barry a bloody nose. So it's fighting now, is it, Tom Goss? Mr. Morgan said. Quite the little lion heart, aren't we? What's the matter with you, boy? Never seen you fighting like this before. Haven't you been in enough trouble today without this? Now get inside, the two of you. Tom, you can clean out the guinea pigs and wipe down the blackboard. Barry, you can sweep the classroom and tidy the bookshelves. Off you go. Any more of this, and I'll bang your heads together. Hear me? No one dared say a word about Tom's sausage lion after his fight with Barry. There were no more mocking growls, and Tom was feeling a lot happier when he got off the bus and ran up the lane towards home. Sam usually ran out to meet him, but he wasn't there today. Where's Sam? He said as he came through into the kitchen. His mother and father were sitting at the table. Father still had his boots on and he looked grim. Good day, dear, Tom's mother said as usual, standing up and wiping her hands on her apron. Take your coat off and I'll get you your tea. Where's Sam? Said Tom, who could tell from their faces something was being hidden from him. Gone, said his father. And if he knows what's good for him, he'll stay away too. What's happened? Said Tom, half out of his coat. What's the matter? What do you mean Sam's gone? Gone where? I don't know, and I don't care, said his father. And he looked up at Tom. I warned you, and I warned you. I told you to keep that dog of yours shut up, didn't I? I told you he was getting out of control. It's not Tom's fault, dear, said Tom's mother. These things happen. We've lost lambs before. But these weren't just lost, were they? His father said, banging the table. That dog of his killed them. Sam, said Tom. Sam killed some sheep. He couldn't have. How do you know that it was him? Because I saw him. I saw him running away, and that's good enough for me. Just after lunch it was. First thing I saw was a sheep bolting across the hill on the other side of the brook. I thought it was a fox at first, so I came in here and got my gun. By the time I got out there again, there was that dog of yours with 3 lambs lying beside him on the ground. The shot frightened him, and he took off up into the woods, going like a train. You shot at Sam! You shot at him, Tom shouted. Course I did, his father said. What do you expect me to do, stand there and watch him killing my sheep? I had to frighten him off somehow. Don't worry, I didn't hit him. I was too far away and I was aiming above his head anyway. But as soon as he comes back, that dog will have to go. You can't have a dog on a farm that kills sheep. And I'm going to leave it